Sometimes life gives people second chances. Not with grand gestures, but through small moments of coffee, a walk, a familiar smile. And as Emily drifted to sleep, her heart whispered the truth she had been afraid to admit for months. She still Lo-Fei, few weeks after that unexpected meeting. Emily stood outside Ryan's apartment building, her heart beating fast. This time there was no package in her hand, no note, no gift wrapped with blue ribbon. It was just her. She had spent days thinking about whether she should come, whether it was too soon, too much, or too late. But every time she tried to move on, her thoughts went back to him too, the way he looked at her during their last meeting. To the warmth in his voice when he said her name. She realized she didn't want another goodbye. She wanted a beginning. It was a cool Sunday afternoon, the kind of day that carried a soft wind in quiet streets. Emily took a deep breath, walked up the steps, and knocked. For a few seconds, there was no sound. Then the door opened, and there he was, Ryan, looking surprised but not shocked. He smiled, and that simple expression eased every fear inside her. "Emily," he said softly, leaning against the doorframe. "You're here." "I didn't bring a gift this time," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Just me." Ryan's smile deepened, his eyes kind. "That's the only one I ever wanted." He stepped aside and she walked in. His apartment felt warm and familiar. There was a coffee mug on the table, books stacked on the counter, and soft music playing in the background. She noticed the bracelet still on his wrist, the same one she had sent weeks ago. That small detail filled her with emotion. They sat on the couch at first, saying nothing. The air between them felt calm, not awkward, but heavy with all the things they still hadn't said out loud. Finally, Ryan broke the silence. "I wasn't sure if I'd see you again." "I wasn't sure either," she admitted. "But after that day, I couldn't stop thinking about you." He nodded slowly. "Same here. It's strange, isn't it? We went months without talking, but when I saw you again, it felt like no time had passed." Emily looked down, her hands clasped tightly. "I missed you, Ryan, more than I thought I would." Ryan reached out, gently touching her hand. "You don't have to apologize for that. I missed you too. Every day, if I'm being honest." Those words hung in the air like a quiet confession. Emily met his gaze, and for a moment the world outside disappeared. There was no past, no mistakes. Just two people remembering how it felt to belong somewhere safe. They spent the afternoon really talking this time. About how life had been without each other. About the things they learned while apart. There was no anger, no blame, just honesty. They both admitted that they had needed space back then, that sometimes love gets lost under the weight of distance and pride as the hours passed. Laughter returned between them, gentle and real. Ryan brewed coffee the way she liked it, and they sat by the window watching the golden sunlight fade into evening. Everything felt natural, as if the months of silence had never happened. At one point, Emily noticed a photo on his shelf. It was from the last trip they took together before life pulled them apart. She smiled. "You kept this?" "Of course," he said simply. "It was one of the best days we ever had." She traced the frame with her finger. "I thought you'd forgotten." Ryan shook his head. "I tried to move on, but forgetting you was never possible." The honesty in his voice made her heart ache in the best way. She had come there unsure of what to expect, afraid it would be awkward or painful. Instead, it felt like coming home after a long journey. As night settled, they stepped onto the small balcony. The city glowed below, soft and alive. The wind carried the scent of rain, and distant sounds of traffic hummed quietly. Emily leaned against the railing, looking out at the lights. Ryan stood beside her, close enough that their shoulders brushed. "I used to stand out here," said quietly, "and wonder what you were doing." She smiled. "And I used to wonder if you still thought of me." He turned toward her. Every time I looked at the sky, the honesty between them felt fragile, yet freeing. For the first time, they weren't pretending. They weren't running from what they felt. Ryan reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. Their fingers intertwined naturally, as if they'd been waiting for that small moment all along. After a long pause, Ryan said softly, "I don't want to rush anything. I just want us to be real this time. Emily nodded. Me too. I don't know where this will go, but I want to try. Smiled. That same warm smile that had always calmed her heart. And that's enough. Inside, the clock ticked quietly, the sound steady and comforting. They stayed by the window, talking about small things, their favorite places to eat, the songs that reminded them of each other, the plans they once dreamed of making. There were no promises of forever, no dramatic declarations, just a quiet understanding that some bonds don't fade, they wait. Later. As Emily prepared to leave, Ryan walked her to the door. She turned to face him, reluctant to go. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" He asked. "For remembering," she replied. He smiled. "How could I ever forget the best part of my life?" She felt tears sting her eyes, but they were happy tears, full of peace. "I'll see you soon." "You better," he said with a grin. "Next time, no long breaks." She laughed softly, then stepped outside. As the door closed behind her, she stood for a moment under the dim hallway light, her heart full. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But she knew this something had healed. Driving home, Emily thought about how strange life was. How two people could drift apart, live different lives, and still find their way back, not through grand gestures, but through something as simple as a small bracelet, a quiet conversation, a visit without a gift. When she reached home, she sat by her window looking at the stars. For the first time in months, she felt peace instead of longing. Love didn't always return in the same shape, but when it did, it carried more meaning than before. Ryan, sitting in his apartment across the city, looked at the bracelet and smiled. He whispered to himself. She came back. Then he turned off the light, knowing this time he wouldn't have to wonder. In the weeks that followed, they saw each other often, coffee on Sundays, walks in the park, quiet evenings spent talking about everything and nothing. They didn't define what they were yet, but they didn't need to. They simply enjoyed being together again, letting time do what it always does: heal, soften, and rebuild. And as days turned into nights and laughter replaced silence, one truth became clear to both of them. Sometimes love doesn't end. It pauses, waits, and returns when hearts are ready. Emily had missed him deeply, but in giving that small birthday gift, she had unknowingly opened a door that led them both back to where they truly belonged, each other and him. Emily sat alone in her quiet apartment, staring at the city lights outside her window. The night felt heavier than usual. It had been 6 long months since she last saw Ryan. Their relationship hadn't ended in anger, had just faded slowly. Quietly. He had moved to another city for work, and she had stayed behind to chase her own career. At first, they promised to call, to text, to stay close no matter what. But life had its own way of pulling people apart. Messages turned into silence, and silence turned into distance. Still, Ryan's absence had left a space in Emily's heart that nothing seemed to fill. That evening, Emily picked up her phone to distract herself, scrolling through her calendar without much thought. Then she saw it. Ryan's birthday, don't forget. Her chest tightened. For a moment, she just stared at the words, frozen. She had set that reminder a year ago when things between them still felt strong, when they laughed about growing old together. Now seeing it made her heart ache. She told herself to ignore it, that it didn't matter anymore, but deep down she knew it did. She missed him more than she wanted to admit. She put the phone down and walked around her apartment, trying to shake the feeling. Every corner reminded her of him, the couch where they had once watched movies. It's a small plant he gave her that somehow still grew by the window. Even the sweater he left behind was still neatly folded in her drawer. She had kept it, telling herself she would return it someday. But she never did. Sometimes she took it out just to smell the faint scent of his cologne. It made her feel close to him, even though he was miles away. Emily sat down at her desk, staring at a blank piece of wrapping paper. She didn't plan to send him anything, but her heart wouldn't rest. Something inside her whispered that maybe, just maybe, a small gesture could bridge the silence between them. She opened a drawer and pulled out a tiny bracelet she had made months ago. It was simple thin leather with ocean blue stones. Ryan had once told her that blue reminded him of peace, of calm days by the sea. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the bracelet. It wasn't expensive or fancy, but it carried meaning. She remembered the times they'd walk by the beach talking about dreams and plans. She remembered how he'd hold her hand and say, "No matter what happens, we'll always have this." Now, those words echoed in her mind, bittersweet and distant. Emily found a small box and began wrapping the bracelet. She didn't want the gift to say too much. She didn't want it to sound like she was asking for him back. She just wanted him to know she remembered, that she still cared in some quiet, honest way. Before sealing the box, she took a small piece of paper and wrote a short note. "I don't know if you'll wear it, but I hope you'll remember me when you see it." She read it over once, her heart pounding, wondering if it was too much or not enough. But she didn't change a word. The message felt true, and that was all that mattered. She placed the note inside and tied the box with a thin blue ribbon. Then she wrote his address on the envelope. She had memorized it long ago, though she hadn't used it in months. She hesitated before sealing the package, unsure if sending it was the right thing to do. What if he didn't care anymore? What if he had moved on? But even with all those questions swirling in her head, something in her heart felt certain. This wasn't about getting him back, it was about saying something that had been left unsaid. Emily looked at the package for a long moment before whispering softly, "Happy birthday, Ryan." Her voice cracked slightly, but there was warmth in it, too. A mix of sadness, love, and hope. That night, after she mailed the gift, she couldn't sleep. Every few minutes, she rolled over, wondering if she had done the right thing. The city outside buzzed with life, but her apartment stayed still and quiet. She thought about the first time she met Ryan. How he had accidentally spilled coffee on her at a bookstore and apologized 100 times until she laughed. From that awkward moment had grown a bond that felt like home. Remembering it made her smile and ache at the same time. She picked up her phone again, tempted to message him, but she stopped herself. The gift was enough. If he wanted to reach out, he would. If not, she could still live with the peace of knowing she had done something kind. She turned off the light and lay in the dark, listening to the quiet hum of the night, for the first time in a long while. Her thoughts weren't filled with regret, they were filled with memories, good ones, soft ones. Somewhere far away, Ryan was living his life, maybe laughing, maybe working late as he always did. She wondered if he still thought of her sometimes. He ever missed the way they used to talk for hours about everything and nothing? She didn't know the answer, but she hoped he did. As dawn crept through the blinds, Emily sat up, feeling a little lighter. Maybe love wasn't always about being together. Sometimes it was about remembering, about caring even when you no longer had a reason to. The gift she had sent was her way of saying that what they had mattered, that it still meant something even after all this time. She made herself a cup of coffee and looked out at the sunrise. The city was waking up, and for the first time in months, she felt a quiet sense of closure. Or maybe it was a beginning. She didn't know what would happen next. Maybe Ryan would write back. Maybe he wouldn't. But at least now she had done what her heart needed. In that peaceful morning light, Emily smiled softly to herself. The ache of missing him was still there, but it didn't hurt the same way. It felt gentler, almost comforting. Because love, she realized, doesn't always disappear. Sometimes it just changes shape. Sometimes it lives quietly in the small things, a reminder on a phone, a bracelet in a box, or a memory that still makes you smile long after it's gone. And somewhere, maybe soon, that little box would reach Ryan's hands. Maybe he would open it, see her handwriting, and remember too. Maybe he would smile the way she just did. Either way, Emily had found her peace. That's all she wanted on that quiet night, the chance to let her heart speak. One last time. Ryan was at work when the small package landed on his desk. It was an ordinary day filled with meetings, emails, and the constant buzz of office chatter. He was tired, distracted, and barely paying attention when the receptionist said, "This came for you, Ryan." He thanked her absently, thinking it was some work-related delivery. But when he looked down and saw the neat handwriting on the wrapping, everything around him seemed to fade. He knew that handwriting. His heart skipped a beat. It was Emily's. For a moment, he just stared at the package, his thoughts tangled. Why would she send him something after all this time? He hadn't heard from her in months, not since they'd both quietly drifted apart. Life had carried them in different directions. But now, holding that little box, memories came rushing back. Her laughter, her warmth, the way she used to leave sticky notes with small drawings on his fridge. He hadn't realized how much he had missed that until this very second. Ryan turned the box in his hands. It was simple, wrapped with care. His fingers trembled slightly as he pulled at the ribbon. Inside was a bracelet thin made of blue stones. He froze. That color? She always said he looked good in blue because it matched his calm personality. She even wore a similar bracelet once, saying it reminded her of the ocean, peaceful and deep. Now that same color glowed faintly under the office lights. And it felt like a piece of her had just appeared in front of him. Then he saw the note. It was small, folded neatly beside the bracelet. He opened it carefully, almost afraid of what it might say. The handwriting was unmistakable, soft and round, just like he remembered. The message was short. I don't know if you'll wear it, but I hope you'll remember me when you see it. Ryan read it once, then again. His chest tightened. It was such a simple message, but it hit harder than anything else could have. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the note as if it held all the words they'd left unsaid. Around him, the office buzzed with phones ringing and keyboards clacking. But for him, time had stopped. He thought about calling her right away. His phone sat on the desk, glowing quietly beside the package. But what would he even say? Thanks for the gift. It didn't seem enough. He wasn't sure if she wanted a reply or if this was her way of saying goodbye for good. Still, his heart was restless. He slipped the bracelet onto his wrist, feeling the cool stones against his skin. For the first time in a long while, he smiled not out of happiness, but out of a quiet. Aching warmth dot the rest of the day passed in a blur. Every time he looked at the bracelet, a wave of memories washed over him. He remembered her surprise birthday dinners, the nights they stayed up watching old movies, the morning coffee runs where she'd always forget her order and laugh at herself. He had tried to bury those moments, to move forward, but now they came alive again, as if no time had passed. When evening came, his friends threw him a small birthday gathering at a local bar. There was laughter, music, and a cake that said, "Happy birthday, Ryan," in bright frosting. But even as he smiled and joked, his thoughts kept drifting back to that note in his pocket. While everyone else celebrated, he felt something quietly shift inside him, a gentle reminder of a connection he hadn't truly let go of. After the party, Ryan drove home through quiet streets lit by soft city lights. He parked the car, leaned his head back, and exhaled deeply. The night was calm and the moon hung low above the skyline. He pulled the note from his jacket and read it again under the faint glow of the dashboard light. "I hope you'll remember me." He whispered to himself, "How could I ever forget you, Emily?" Inside his apartment, everything felt strangely empty. The rooms were neat, organized, but lifeless. He sat by the window, the same spot where he used to talk to her on long calls that stretched past midnight. He ran his thumb over the bracelet again, the stones catching the moonlight. It almost felt like she was there, sitting beside him, smiling the way she used to. He couldn't fight the urge any longer. He reached for his phone, opened their old chat, and scrolled up. The last message between them was months ago. Something ordinary about returning a sweater. Reading it now made him smile bitterly. They had been so careful with their words, pretending it was just friendship, but both had known there was more left unsaid. His fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long time before he finally typed, "Thank you, Emily. I didn't expect this, but it means more than you think." He stared at the message. Simple, honest, and safe. He didn't want to push too far or reopen wounds. Still, his heart pounded as he pressed send. The moment the message was delivered, he leaned back and closed his eyes, feeling a strange calm wash over him. Maybe she would reply, maybe not. But at least now, the silence between them had been broken. Ryan spent the next few minutes just sitting there, letting the quiet fill the room. He remembered how they had promised to always celebrate each other's birthdays no matter what. She had kept that promise in her own way. And even though they were far apart, that single gesture had reached him more deeply than any grand celebration could. He glanced out the window again. The city lights flickered below, distant and beautiful. He wondered what Emily was doing at that moment. She was thinking about him too, or if she had already moved on. But deep down, he hoped she still cared, even a little. Because he did. Before going to bed, he placed the bracelet carefully on his nightstand. He didn't take it off because he had to. He just wanted to look at it one last time. The blue stones glimmered softly, like small pieces of the ocean trapped in silver. He smiled faintly and whispered, "Happy birthday to me," though his thoughts were really with her. That night, Ryan dreamed of simpler days, of laughter in crowded cafes, of long walks by the water, of her voice calling his name through the wind. When he woke up the next morning, sunlight spilled across the room. The first thing he noticed was the bracelet catching the light. It felt like a promise, a reminder that even when life moves on, some connections never truly fade. He didn't know what would happen next. Maybe they'd talk again, maybe they wouldn't. But one thing was clear: Emily's gift had stirred something real. It wasn't just a birthday present. It was a quiet bridge between two hearts that had once loved deeply, still connected through time and distance. Ryan smiled to himself, slipped on the bracelet again, and thought maybe some stories aren't over. Maybe they just paused for a while. A week had passed since Ryan received Emily's gift, and their quiet exchange of messages had become a gentle rhythm in both their lives. What began as a simple thank you turned into short conversations that stretched into late-night chats. They didn't talk about the past or what went wrong. Instead, they spoke about work, friends, favorite movies, and little things they used to share before everything drifted apart. Each message felt like a soft step back toward something familiar, something warm. Emily tried to stay calm, but her heart raced every time her phone buzzed with his name. She had told herself not to expect anything. She just wanted to know he was doing well. But deep inside, hope quietly grew again. Ryan's messages were thoughtful and kind, just like before. He asked about her job, her new apartment, and even if she still drank her coffee too sweet. Those small details made her smile. It was as if no time had passed at all then. One evening, as she sat on her couch scrolling through their chat, a new message appeared. "I'll be in your city next weekend. Maybe we could catch up." Emily froze, staring at the words. Her heart started pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Part of her wanted to say yes right away, but another part hesitated. What if meeting him brought all those old feelings back too strongly? What if it hurt to see him again? But deep down, she knew the truth. She had never stopped missing him. Her fingers trembled slightly as she typed back, "I'd like that." The week that followed felt like both an eternity and a heartbeat. Emily couldn't focus at work. Every small task reminded her of Ryan. She tried on half her closet before deciding what to wear, told herself not to overthink, and then overthought anyway. When Saturday finally arrived, she found herself standing outside the small cafe they used to visit on rainy days. The same cafe with soft lights, warm smells, and a corner table that had once been theirs. She got there early. Her hands shook a little as she stirred her coffee, watching people come and go. Every time the door opened, her eyes lifted, hoping it was him. Then, suddenly, he was there. Ryan stepped through the door, wearing that same navy jacket she remembered. He looked almost the same, maybe a little older, maybe a little more tired, but his smile was still the same one that could melt her heart in seconds. Their eyes met, and for a moment, everything around them seemed to fade. The noise of the cafe disappeared. It felt like time had folded, bringing the past back to life. Ryan walked toward her slowly, that familiar warmth returning with every step. "Hey," he said softly, his voice carrying both surprise and something deeper, relief. Emily smiled, her voice quiet but steady. "Hey." He sat across from her, and for a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was full of things they both felt but didn't yet say. Then Ryan broke it with a small grin. "You still take your coffee the same way, don't you?" Too much sugar, not enough patience. She laughed, shaking her head. You still remember that? How could I forget? He said, his eyes warm. They talked for hours. The conversation flowed easily, like it always had. They'd caught up on everything: his new job, her projects, the cities they'd both seen, the people they'd met. But under all the light talk was a quiet current of emotion. Every time their hands brushed while reaching for something on the table, a spark ran through her. She could tell he felt it too. The afternoon stretched into evening. They moved from coffee to dinner, walking through the park nearby as the sun dipped low behind the trees. The air was cool, and the soft orange glow made everything feel calm and unreal. They laughed about old memories, how they once got lost on a hiking trip, how he'd always forget their movie tickets, how she once burned his birthday cake, but he ate it anyway at one point. As they stood by the lake, Emily noticed Ryan glancing down at his wrist. The bracelet she had sent him gleamed faintly in the fading light. "You're wearing it," she said softly. He smiled, looking at her. "Every day since I got it." Something in her chest tightened. That small piece of jewelry, once just a gesture, had become a bridge between them. For a few moments, they didn't need to say anything more. The silence between them was filled with unspoken words, with feelings that had never really left. When they finally returned to the cafe to pick up their things, the lights were dim and only a few customers remained. It felt like the world had grown quieter around them, as if giving them space to speak freely. Ryan looked at her for a long time before saying, I didn't realize how much I missed this. Just talking to you." Emily met his eyes. "Me too." He hesitated, then leaned slightly closer. "Maybe next time, don't send a gift. Just come instead." The words hung in the air, soft and hopeful. Emily felt her breath catch. He wasn't asking for anything more than time, more than the chance to see her again. And that was enough. She smiled gently. "Next time, I will." They stood outside the cafe as the night breeze brushed past them. The city lights reflected in the puddles from a light rain earlier that day. Ryan opened his umbrella and held it out over both of them, just like he used to. They walked together down the quiet street, side by side, saying little but feeling everything. When they reached her car, Emily turned to face him. "It was good to see you again, Ryan." He looked at her, his expression soft but full of meaning. "It was more than good, Emily. It was something I didn't know I needed." For a moment, they just stood there, caught in that space between goodbye and something new. Neither of them moved, as if afraid that one step might break the fragile peace they had found. Then Ryan smiled, took her hand gently, and said, "Let's not let months pass before the next time, okay?" She nodded. "Okay." He waited until she got in her car, gave her one last wave, and then watched as she drove away. Emily glanced in the mirror as she turned the corner and saw him still standing there under the streetlight, the blue bracelet catching the glow. That night she couldn't sleep. Her mind replayed every word, every glance, every quiet moment. It felt like something long lost had returned, not in the same way, but in a softer, more fragile form. She didn't know what the future would bring, but she knew one thing for sure. That meeting had changed everything.